Though the rain on the windshield of a $500,000 Maybach sounds different. It's a muted, respectful tap, as if the heavens themselves know not to disturb the man inside. Sebastian Knight, a titan of industry, whose net worth was whispered in the billions, stared out at the glistening, unforgiving streets of downtown Seattle. He was a king in a chrome and leather chariot insulated from the world. But then he saw her. A ghost from a life he had burned to the ground. Isabella, his ex-wife, clutching a swollen belly before crumpling to the wet pavement. In that single, heart-stopping moment, the billionaire's sterile world shattered. What he did in the next few minutes and the days that followed would ignite a firestorm of secrets and lies, proving that some bankruptcies are not of the wallet, but of the soul. The Tuesday had been a monument to Sebastian Knight's power. It began with the hostile takeover of a rival tech firm, a ruthless chess move he'd orchestrated over 6 months. His afternoon was spent in a glass-walled boardroom, 30 floors above the city, where his board of directors had unanimously approved a stock buyback that would add another $100 million to his personal fortune. He was 34 years old, with a jawline as sharp as his business acumen and eyes the color of cold steel. He had everything a man could want, and he felt absolutely nothing. The feeling of emptiness was a familiar companion, a shadow that clung to him in his penthouse apartment, on his private jet, and now in the back of his chauffeured Maybach. As his driver, a stoic man named Arthur Pennyworth, navigated the rush-hour traffic, Sebastian loosened his silk tie, the knot feeling like a noose. "Just head straight to the penthouse, Arthur," Sebastian said, his voice flat. "I'll have dinner sent up." "Very good, Mr. Knight," Arthur replied, his eyes on the road. The rain fell in relentless sheets, blurring the neon signs into abstract watercolor paintings. It was on a street corner under the flickering green light of a pharmacy sign that Sebastian saw her. Time seemed to warp, slowing down to a syrupy, painful crawl. A woman, her thin coat soaked through her dark hair plastered to her face, stood clutching a bag of groceries. Her other hand was pressed protectively against her heavily pregnant stomach. As a bus roared past, splashing a tidal wave of grimy water onto the curb, she swayed. Her knees buckled, the grocery bag split open, and the apples rolled across the wet sidewalk as she collapsed. For most people, she was just another unfortunate soul on a miserable evening, but for Sebastian, she was the axis on which his world had once turned. Isabella Rossi, his Isabella. A strangled sound escaped his lips. Arthur, startled, glanced in the rearview mirror. "Sir, is everything all right?" Sebastian didn't answer. His mind was a maelstrom of conflicting impulses. "Drive on. It's not your problem anymore." She made her choice, but his body betrayed him. His heart, a long dormant organ, hammered against his ribs. He saw her face, pale and unconscious against the dark, wet concrete. And he saw the swell of her belly. Pregnant. The word detonated in his mind, sending shockwaves of rage, confusion, and a terrifying, unfamiliar pang of concern. Who had done this to her? Who was the man who had replaced him, only to let her end up like this, fainting on a street corner? The divorce had been 2 years ago. 2 years of icy silence. He had heard through the grapevine, a grapevine he paid a premium to maintain, that she had left Seattle. He had pictured her living a quiet, happy life, somewhere else, a life that was a constant, unspoken rebuke to him. Not this. "Arthur, stop the car. Now." Sebastian's voice was a raw command that sliced through the car's serene quiet. Arthur, a man who had served the Knight family for 20 years and was rarely surprised, swerved the massive vehicle expertly to the curb hazard lights flashing. "Sir." Sebastian was already throwing the door open, the cold, wet air a slap to his face. He didn't care about his $1,000 suit or the bespoke leather shoes now being ruined by the rain. He ran his long strides, eating up the pavement. Kneeling beside her, he gently brushed the wet hair from her face. She was thinner than he remembered, with dark circles under her eyes that his memory had never included. She was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. A small crowd was beginning to gather their faces, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Someone was on their phone, likely calling 911. "I've got her," Sebastian shouted, his voice asserting an authority no one dared question. "I'm her husband." The lie felt strange and bitter on his tongue. He scooped her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile. As he lifted her, her head lolled back, and a faint, pained moan escaped her lips. The sight of her vulnerability, her utter helplessness, extinguished the last embers of his anger, replacing it with a cold, terrifying dread. "Arthur, the hospital, St. Ambrose. Call ahead, tell them Dr. Marcus Cole is expecting us. Tell them it's for me," Sebastian barked as he carefully maneuvered her into the spacious back seat. He settled in beside her, cradling her head on his lap, his hand instinctively going to rest on her stomach. He could feel the firm, round shape of it through her damp coat. A new life. A life that had nothing to do with him. As the Maybach sped through the city, its horn parting traffic like the Red Sea, Sebastian Knight looked down at the face of the woman he had loved more than his own empire and had banished from his life. The questions swirled, each one more agonizing than the last. Why was she back in Seattle? Why was she in such a state? And who was the father of the child she was carrying? He had built his world on a foundation of control and absolute certainty. In the space of 5 minutes, Isabella had turned it all to rubble. The VIP wing of St. Ambrose Hospital was a world away from the chaotic emergency room on the ground floor. Here, the floors were carpeted, the lighting was soft, and the air smelled faintly of lavender. Not antiseptic. Sebastian had paid for this wing's renovation himself. It was his sanctuary for the inevitable health scares that came with being surrounded by an aging board of directors. He had never imagined he would be here for her. He paced to the private waiting room like a caged panther. He had shed his ruined suit jacket, his tie was gone, and his usually immaculate white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, creased and damp. Arthur had handled the admission with quiet efficiency, shielding them from prying eyes and paperwork. Now they waited. Isabella had been whisked away by a team led by Dr. Cole, Sebastian's personal physician. The initial assessment in the ER had been grimly straightforward. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, and exhaustion. They were running more tests. All Sebastian could do was wait and let the ghosts of his past torment him. He sank into a plush leather chair, burying his face in his hands. The image of her collapse was seared into his mind, but it was the memories behind it that truly twisted the knife. He remembered their first meeting. She was a freelance art curator, hired to help decorate his new sterile penthouse. He'd expected someone older, more severe. Instead, in walked Isabella Rossi, with a laugh that could fill the cavernous space and eyes that saw past the billionaire to the man. She had teased him about his monochrome taste, calling his apartment a very expensive, very beautiful prison. She filled his life with color, literally and figuratively. She convinced him to buy a chaotic, vibrant painting by a new artist instead of another soulless, geometric sculpture. She dragged him to hole-in-the-wall jazz clubs and taught him how to appreciate the taste of cheap, delicious street food. She was the only person who wasn't afraid of him. She challenged him, loved him, and for a while she had made him happy. Their wedding was an intimate affair against his mother Catherine's wishes for a grand society event. They honeymooned in a small villa in Tuscany, where they spoke of having children, of a life that balanced his ambition with her soulfulness. He had felt for the first time like he was building a life, not just an empire. And then came the poison. It started subtly. A seed of doubt planted here, a whisper of suspicion there. It came from Chloe Jenkins, Isabella's best friend and maid of honor. Chloe, a social climber with a razor-sharp wit, had always been a fixture in their lives. After the wedding, she'd become Sebastian's confidant too. Isabella seems distant, doesn't she? Chloe had said one afternoon, over drinks at the club. She's been spending so much time with that new artist she's championing. What's his name, Julian? Sebastian had brushed it off. But the seed was planted. Then came the evidence. An anonymous email sent to his private account. It contained photographs. Grainy, long-lens shots of Isabella having lunch with Julian. In one, he was reaching across the table, his hand covering hers. In another, they were embracing outside a gallery, a hug that seemed to last just a second too long. It was circumstantial, but in the fertile ground of his burgeoning suspicion, it took root. The final killing blow was a hotel receipt, left accidentally in a book Isabella had been reading. A room for two at a boutique hotel downtown on a day Sebastian had been. Out of the country, he confronted her. He didn't ask, he accused. He laid the photos out on their glass dining table like a prosecutor presenting evidence. He was cold, clinical, and utterly ruthless. Explain this, Isabella. He remembered the look on her face. Not guilt, but sheer unadulterated shock, followed by a hurt so profound it had momentarily stunned him. Sebastian, this is insane. Julian is my client. He's gay. We were celebrating him landing a gallery in New York. The hug. He was crying. He was so happy. And the hotel? He'd sneered. His pride, wounded, his trust shattered. I have no idea what that is. I've never seen it before. You have to believe me. She had pleaded, her eyes swimming with tears. But he didn't. In his world, there were no coincidences. There was only cause and effect, loyalty and betrayal. He had built firewalls around his heart his entire life, and she was the only one he'd ever let in. The thought that she had exploited that trust sent him into a cold, blind rage. He saw her not as the woman he loved, but as a security risk, a vulnerability he had to eliminate. The divorce was swift and brutal. His lawyer sharks that they were eviscerated her. She refused to take a cent from him, a final act of pride that he had at the time interpreted as an admission of guilt. She signed the papers, packed a single suitcase, and walked out of his life. Chloe had been there to comfort him, telling him he'd done the right thing, that he was better off without her. Now, sitting in the silence of the hospital waiting room, the memory felt different. The clarity of his rage had faded, replaced by a murky, unsettling doubt. Had her shock been real? Had he, in his arrogant certainty, made a catastrophic mistake? The door opened, and Dr. Cole walked in, his face grim. Sebastian shot to his feet. How is she? She's stable. Sebastian? The doctor said, his tone professional, but laced with concern. We've got her on an IV drip. As I said, she's suffering from severe exhaustion and malnutrition. It looks like she hasn't been taking care of herself for weeks, maybe months. That's dangerous for anyone, let alone a woman who's approximately 7 months pregnant. 7 months. Sebastian did the math. The baby was conceived 5 months after the divorce. A bitter wave of something he refused to name washed over him. So she had moved on, quickly. And the baby? Sebastian asked the words, feeling foreign in his mouth. The baby's heartbeat is strong for now, but Isabella's condition puts the pregnancy at high risk. We need to keep her here for observation. We need to get her strength back. Dr. Cole paused, looking at his friend and client. Sebastian, she's been through a lot. She's waking up now. She's asking for her purse. She wants to leave. Sebastian's jaw tightened. Of course she did. Her pride was a fortress. She's not going anywhere. Hey, he strode past the doctor and down the short hall to her room. He pushed the door open gently. Isabella was propped up on the pillows, looking small and lost in the large hospital bed. An IV tube snaked into her arm. Her eyes, those beautiful brown eyes that once looked at him with so much love, were now filled with a weary, guarded hostility. "What are you doing here, Sebastian?" she asked, her voice raspy but firm. "I brought you here," he said, stepping closer. "You collapsed on the street." "I see," she said, her gaze dropping to the pristine white sheets. "Well, thank you. You can send the bill to... Well, I'll figure it out. I'd like to get dressed now." She made a move to sit up, but winced, a hand flying to her stomach. "Don't be ridiculous. You're not going anywhere," he said, his tone sharper than he intended. "The doctor said you need to stay." Her eyes flashed with the old fire he remembered. "And since when do you care what happens to me? Your concern expired 2 years ago, along with our marriage." The words were a physical blow. "I don't want to see you destitute and fainting on sidewalks, Isabella." "My life is no longer your concern," she shot back. "I was doing just fine." "Fine," he scoffed, gesturing around the room. "Is this what you call fine? Malnourished, exhausted, ending up in a hospital? Who's the father? Isabella? Where is he? Why isn't he here taking care of you?" He saw the flicker of pain in her eyes before she masked it with anger. She lifted her chin, a gesture of defiance he knew all too well. "That," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "is absolutely none of your business. Now please get out. I don't want you here." He stood there frozen. The king in his castle had no power here. The woman in the bed, weak and unwell, held all the cards. She was shutting him out, just as he had once shut her out. He had demanded an explanation from her 2 years ago, and on the basis of flimsy evidence and poisonous whispers, he had refused to believe her. Now he was demanding answers again, and he realized with a sickening jolt that he had no right to them. He turned and walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind him. In the hallway, the echoes of his past accusations mocked him. For the first time in a very long time, Sebastian Knight didn't know what to do next. But he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't walk away. Not again. The next morning, Sebastian arrived at the hospital, armed with a new strategy. Confrontation had failed. Pride and anger were useless tools against Isabella's fortified heart, so he would resort to his greatest strength resources. He bypassed her room and went straight to the administration office. Within 15 minutes, he had paid her estimated hospital bill in full anonymously. He arranged for a private suite, a nutritionist, and the best prenatal specialist in the state to be assigned to her case. He told the staff that all charges were to be routed through his family office, no exceptions. If she wouldn't accept his help directly, he would weave a safety net of money and influence so fine she wouldn't even see it. His next call was to a man named David Chen, a private investigator. Chen was discreet, ferociously intelligent, and operated in the grey areas where Sebastian couldn't officially tread. "Chen, I have a job for you," Sebastian said, his voice low as he stood in a secluded corner of the hospital garden. "It's personal." "I'm listening, Mr. Knight." "Her name is Isabella Rossi, my ex-wife. I need to know everything. Where she's been living, where she works, who her friends are. And I need to know who the father of her child is. But you will be a ghost, Chen. She's not to know she's being watched. This is about understanding her situation, not about intimidation. Am I clear?" "Crystal, Mr. Knight. I'll get started immediately." With the pieces in motion, Sebastian felt a sliver of his control returning. He was an investigator, now seeking not corporate malfeasance, but the truth of a life he had discarded. He tried to visit Isabella again, this time bringing a bouquet of her favorite flowers, simple, cheerful freesias. He found her sitting by the window, staring out at the city. She looked stronger, the color returning to her cheeks. She glanced at the flowers, and for a fleeting moment he saw a flicker of the old Isabella, a softening around her eyes. Then the mask was back. "They're beautiful, Sebastian. A bit extravagant for a hospital room, don't you think?" Her tone was polite, but coolly distant. "I just wanted to make sure you were comfortable," he said, placing them on the bedside table. "I am," she said, not looking at him. Your anonymous benefactor has seen to that. A private suite, gourmet meals. It has your signature all over it. The grand gesture. You were always good at those. Isabella, I don't want it, she said, finally turning to face him. Her gaze was unflinching. I don't want your money. I don't want your help. I appreciate you getting me here, but I can take it from here. How? He asked, genuinely curious. The doctors say you can't work for the remainder of your pregnancy. How will you live? How will you support your child? Like I have been for the past 2 years. On my own, she said proudly. I have savings. I'll be fine. Her pride was infuriating, but also magnificent. He was starting to see the woman he'd fallen in love with again, not the traitor from his memories. This fierce independence didn't square with the image of a woman who had cheated and run off with another man. As if on cue, his phone buzzed. A text from Chloe Jenkins. Heard about what happened. Is Isabella okay? Are you okay? I'm so sorry you have to go through this. Let me know if you need anything at all. XOXO Chloe, the ever-present, ever-supportive friend. He typed back a quick, non-committal reply. He had an urge to talk to her to unload the confusion that was eating at him, but something held him back. That afternoon, Chen delivered his first report. It was a thin file, but every line was a revelation. Isabella hadn't left Seattle. She had moved to the other side of town to a modest working-class neighborhood called Ballard. She rented a small one-bedroom apartment above a bookstore. For the past 18 months, she had been working at the Rolling Pin, a small artisanal bakery, starting her shift at 4 a.m. 6 days a week. Chen's report included photos. Isabella, her hair tied up in a scarf, her hands dusted with flour, laughing with an elderly co-worker. Isabella, sitting on a park bench during her lunch break, reading a book. Isabella walking home, her steps weary, but determined. The most critical part of the report was the last page. Subject appears to have no romantic connections. No male visitors to her apartment. Spends evenings and her one day off alone. Her only close friend appears to be her landlady, an elderly woman named Mrs. Gable. Financial background indicates she lives paycheck to paycheck. No large deposits or unexplained sources of income. Subject is by all accounts completely on her own. Sebastian read the report 3 times. No man, no mysterious boyfriend or fiancé who had abandoned her. She was alone. She had been alone this entire time. The narrative he had constructed for 2 years, the one where she had left him for someone else, began to crumble. If she wasn't with another man, then her pregnancy raised a deeply unsettling question. The timeline was tight, but it wasn't impossible. He thought back to their last days. The final bitter argument. The cold, silent week as the lawyers drew up the papers. Had they... No. He was sure they hadn't been intimate after the confrontation. He had slept in a guest room, a chasm of anger and betrayal between them. He needed to see her life for himself. That evening, he drove his own car, a discreet Audi, not the Maybach, to her neighborhood. He parked across the street from her apartment building. It was a charming old brick building with a bookstore on the ground floor, emitting a warm, inviting glow. It was a world away from his glass tower. He watched as lights flicked on in her second-floor window. He could see her silhouette moving inside. It was a simple, quiet life, the life of a person with nothing to hide. It wasn't the life of a woman carrying another man's child while living off some secret settlement. A thought, cold and sharp, pierced through his confusion. What if the evidence was wrong? He had accepted it so blindly. His pride, his arrogance, his inherent suspicion of emotional attachments, they had all converged to create a perfect storm of misjudgment. He had trusted Chloe's insidious whispers more than the woman he had vowed to love for eternity. He pulled out his phone and called Chen again. Chen, I have a new priority. I'm sending you a file from 2 years ago, an anonymous email with some photo attachments. I need to know where it came from, every digital fingerprint. I also need you to look into the financials of a man named Julian Croft, an artist, and the financials of Chloe Jenkins. Be thorough. Be invisible. Understood, Mr. Knight. As he hung up, Sebastian looked back at Isabella's window. He had been looking for the villain in her story, the man who had wronged her. But a terrifying new possibility was beginning to dawn on him. What if the villain had been him all along? The days that followed were a strange duality for Sebastian. By day, he was the powerful CEO, making decisions worth millions, his focus as sharp as ever. But his nights were spent in a clandestine world of investigation, poring over the information Chen fed him, trying to piece together a puzzle from 2 years ago. Isabella was discharged from the hospital. True to her word, she refused the luxurious condo he had arranged for her. Instead, she returned to her small apartment in Ballard. Sebastian, through a generous grant, he had a foundation wire to her. Landlady, Mrs. Gable, ensured her rent was covered for the next year and that her fridge was mysteriously always stocked with healthy food. Isabella was suspicious, but Mrs. Gable, a co-conspirator, enlisted by Arthur's gentle persuasion, and a hefty check played her part, beautifully claiming it was a windfall from a long-lost relative. Meanwhile, Chen's investigation was bearing fruit. The first thread to unravel was the artist Julian Croft. Chen's report was unequivocal. Julian had moved to New York 2.5 years ago with his long-term partner, a male ballet dancer. He was, and always had been, openly gay. His financials showed no unusual income, just the steady, modest earnings of a successful artist. Isabella's story about celebrating his New York gallery deal checked out perfectly. Sebastian felt a wave of nausea. The foundation of his accusation was built on sand. The next report from Chen was the earthquake. Mr. Knight, Chen said over an encrypted line, I've analyzed the email you sent me. It's sophisticated. It was sent through a series of anonymizing relays, but the original source IP address, I found a trace. It originated from a public computer terminal at the downtown branch of the Seattle Public Library. A public library? That could be anyone, Sebastian said, frustrated. Correct. However, Chen continued, the photos attached to the email are more revealing. They were taken with a high-end telephoto lens. The metadata was scrubbed, but I managed to recover fragments. The images were manipulated, subtly but definitively. Sebastian froze. Manipulated how? The photo of their hands on the table, Chen explained. The lighting on Mr. Croft's hand is inconsistent with the ambient light of the restaurant. It was likely composited from another photo. The embrace outside the gallery. The original image shows a clear foot of space between their bodies. The version you received was digitally compressed to create an illusion of much greater intimacy. It's professional-level work, not Hollywood special effects, but enough to fool the naked eye, especially an eye that wants to be fooled. An eye that wants to be fooled. The words hit Sebastian like a physical blow. He had wanted to believe it. It was easier to believe in her betrayal than to confront his own fear of intimacy, his own emotional inadequacy. And the hotel receipt? Sebastian asked, his voice barely a whisper. I tracked the transaction, Chen said. The room was paid for with a prepaid credit card purchased with cash. A dead end. However, the reservation was made under the name I. Rossi. But the contact phone number provided for the reservation was not Isabella's. It was a burner phone activated 2 days before the reservation and deactivated the day after. We tracked its initial purchase. It was bought at a convenience store 3 blocks from the downtown offices of Jenkins Financial. The world tilted on its axis. Chloe. It couldn't be. She was Isabella's best friend. She had been his rock, the one who told him he was strong, that he had done the right thing. He needed to be sure. He needed one final, irrefutable piece of evidence. "Chen," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "The financials, Chloe Jenkins, dig deeper, offshore accounts, shell corporations, anything. I want to know where every single dollar comes from." While Chen, Doug Sebastian decided to set a trap. He invited Chloe to dinner at a quiet, absurdly expensive French restaurant. He needed to see her face, to watch her eyes as he laid the bait. She arrived looking stunning, dressed in a sleek black dress, her smile bright. "Sebastian, it's so good to see you smile. I've been so worried." "I'm fine, Chloe," he said, offering her a glass of champagne. "In fact, things are clarifying." "Oh," she asked, her curiosity piqued. "Isabella and we've been talking," he lied, watching her reaction. "Really talking. About the past. About the baby." For a split second, a flicker of pure, undiluted panic crossed her face. It was there and gone in an instant, replaced by a perfectly crafted mask of concern. "Oh, Sebastian, are you sure that's wise after everything she did to you? And this baby, it's not yours. It will only complicate things." "Perhaps," Sebastian said, leaning in. "But I'm starting to think I might have been wrong about some things, about what really happened back then. I'm considering giving her another chance, helping her raise the child as a friend, of course." Chloe's knuckles were white as she gripped her champagne flute. "A friend, Sebastian, you are a compassionate man, but you are not a fool. She betrayed you. You saw the proof yourself." Her voice was urgent, desperate. "Did I?" he asked quietly. "Or did I see what someone wanted me to see?" The color drained from her face. At that precise moment, his phone vibrated with a message from Chen. He opened it under the table. It was a single file, a detailed wire transfer record. The record showed a series of payments totaling $250,000, moving from a Cayman Islands account to a private wealth account in Switzerland. The Cayman account was a known shell corporation owned by his most hated business rival, Marcus Thorne, the very man whose company he had just taken over. The Swiss account, after days of Chen's meticulous digging, had been traced back to its ultimate beneficial owner, Chloe Jenkins. The puzzle pieces didn't just fall into place, they slammed together with the force of an explosion. Chloe and Marcus Thorne. It was diabolical. Chloe, consumed by a jealous obsession, wanted Sebastian for herself. Thorne wanted Sebastian's company crippled. They had conspired. Chloe would create the evidence to destroy Sebastian's marriage, knowing that the emotional fallout would distract him, make him vulnerable. In the chaos of the divorce, Thorne would have made his move on Knight Industries. The only thing that had saved him was his own ruthless efficiency. He'd finalized the divorce and thrown himself back into work with such vengeful focus that Thorne's window of opportunity had closed. Chloe, having failed to snag the grieving billionaire, had been paid handsomely by Thorne for her services. Sebastian looked up from his phone. His eyes no longer steel, but glacial ice. "The money, Chloe," he said, his voice soft, but carrying the weight of a death sentence. "The $250,000 from Marcus Thorne. What was it for? For a job well done?" Chloe dropped her champagne flute. It shattered on the floor, the sound echoing the shattering of her entire life. Her face crumpled, the mask of sophistication dissolving into raw, ugly panic. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. There was nowhere left for her to run. The truth, in all its poisonous horror, was finally in the light. The confrontation didn't happen in a boardroom or a courtroom. It happened in the one place that represented everything Sebastian had lost and everything he now hoped to regain, his penthouse. The same space where Isabella had once told him he lived in a beautiful prison. He had summoned them all. Marcus Thorne was lured under the pretense of a final private settlement negotiation regarding the takeover. He arrived arrogant and smug, a predator smelling blood. Chloe was already there, brought by Arthur. She sat huddled on a white leather sofa, looking pale and broken. A ghost at the feast. The final guest was Isabella. Getting her there was the hardest part. He didn't lie to her. He called and simply said, "Isabella, I know the truth. All of it. I know what happened 2 years ago. I have proof. Please, I'm asking you to come to my home, not for me, but for yourself. You deserve to see this." Curiosity, and perhaps a deep, unacknowledged need for closure, made her agree. She arrived in a simple maternity dress, her hand resting on her stomach, as if for strength. She looked at Chloe, then at the odious Marcus Thorne, her face a canvas of confusion. Sebastian stood in the center of the vast living room, the city lights twinkling behind him. Like a cold, indifferent audience. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. His voice was a low, chilling monotone as he laid out the facts with the precision of a surgeon. He started with the doctored photographs, displaying them on the massive wall-mounted screen. He showed the original images Chen had recovered, alongside the manipulated ones he had been sent. A subtle difference, isn't it, Marcus? Just enough to plant a seed. Your digital team is very good. Thorne blustered. This is preposterous. I have no idea what you're talking about. Sebastian ignored him, turning his attention to Chloe. The burner phone used to book the hotel room, purchased 3 blocks from your office. Chloe, and the anonymous email sent from the public library you were so fond of visiting on your lunch breaks. You were always so meticulous. Chloe began to sob, quietly, her face in her hands. Finally, he displayed the bank records on the screen. The wire transfer, a damning digital trail from Thorne's shell company to Chloe's secret Swiss account. $250,000, the price of a marriage, the price of a man's soul. Was it worth it, Chloe? Thorne's face went white. He was a businessman. He knew incontrovertible proof when he saw it. His career was over, but it was Chloe's confession that filled the room with its true venom. She finally looked up, her face streaked with tears and mascara, her eyes wild with a terrifying mix of hatred and self-pity. "He never deserved you," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Isabella. "You were just a naive little artist. You didn't understand his ambition, his power. I did. I was the one who stood by him, who understood what it took to be a knight. I should have been the one. I did it for us." Sebastian. Isabella flinched, as if struck. The betrayal from her best friend was a fresh, agonizing wound. She looked at Chloe, not with anger but with a deep, sorrowful pity. Sebastian walked over to the bar and poured a glass of water, his hand perfectly steady. He handed it to Isabella. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw none of the old arrogance. She saw only a vast, desolate wasteland of regret. He turned back to Thorne and Chloe. "My security team has already delivered copies of all this to the SEC, the district attorney's office, and a few select journalists who enjoy a good corporate scandal. Marcus, you'll be hearing from your board in the morning. Chloe, I hope the money was worth it." Arthur silently escorted a sputtering Thorne and a sobbing Chloe out of the penthouse. The heavy door clicked shut, leaving Sebastian and Isabella alone in the cavernous silence. The city lights seemed to mock them. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Isabella walked to the window, looking out at the skyline. Finally, Sebastian broke the silence. His voice was raw, stripped of all its usual power. "I have no words to describe the magnitude of my failure, Isabella. My pride, my suspicion. I built a fortress around myself, and when you got inside, I panicked and burned the whole thing to the ground with you in it." He took a hesitant step closer. "I didn't believe you. That is the simplest and most terrible truth. You gave me your heart, and I responded with a spreadsheet of fabricated evidence. I destroyed our life for a lie because I was too much of a coward to trust in love." He stopped a few feet away from her, not daring to touch her. "I don't expect you to forgive me. God knows I haven't forgiven myself, but I had to make sure you knew the truth. Isabella turned from the window, her face wet with silent tears. The anger she had held for 2 years had evaporated, replaced by a profound sadness for what they had lost, for the people they had been. "I believed in you, Sebastian," she whispered. "Even when you were at your worst, I believed there was a good man underneath. The man I married. You just made it impossible to see him." He swallowed hard, the final, most important question hanging in the air between them. A question he was terrified to ask, but could no longer live without knowing the answer to. "Isabella," he started, his voice cracking, "the baby. After the divorce." He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Isabella looked down at her belly, her hand resting on the new life within. Then she looked back up at him, her gaze clear and direct, cutting through all the lies and all the pain. "The divorce papers were signed on a Tuesday," she said softly, her memory exact. "The night before the Monday. You came into my room. You didn't say anything. You just held me. I thought it was your way of saying goodbye." The memory, suppressed by his rage and grief, came flooding back. He had been drunk on scotch and despair, desperate for one last moment of connection before the final severance. It had been a silent, desperate, heartbreaking encounter. He stared at her, his mind doing the frantic, hopeful, terrifying math. 7 months. It was possible. It was exactly right. "He's yours, Sebastian," Isabella said, her voice quiet but firm, ending 2 years of agonizing uncertainty. "He has your eyes. I could tell from the first ultrasound." The billionaire, the titan, the king of the world, finally broke. A strangled sob tore from his chest, and Sebastian Knight crumpled to his knees, his carefully constructed universe completely and utterly undone by a truth he should have known all along. Forgiveness is not a door that swings open with a single dramatic apology. It is a path that must be cleared stone by painful stone, through the dense, thorny wilderness of memory and hurt. In the heavy silence that descended upon the penthouse, after Arthur had escorted the wreckage of their past out the door, Sebastian Knight began to understand the sheer scale of the task ahead. Isabella stood by the vast window, her reflection a ghostly silhouette against the glittering, indifferent city. She looked exhausted, the adrenaline of the confrontation fading to reveal a bone-deep weariness. The weight of 2 years of solitary struggle, now compounded by the fresh wound of Chloe's betrayal, seemed to press down on her. Sebastian remained on the floor, the plush carpet offering no comfort. He didn't feel worthy to stand yet. He was a king in the ruins of a kingdom he himself had torched. Finally, he pushed himself to his feet, his movements stiff and uncertain. "Isabella," he began, his voice raspy, "you shouldn't go back to your apartment tonight. You can take the master bedroom. I'll sleep in one of the guest suites on the other side of the penthouse. You won't even know I'm here." It was a logical, practical offer, the only language he was truly fluent in. She turned from the window, and he saw not anger, but a profound sadness in her eyes. "No, Sebastian, thank you, but I need to go home." "Home?" The word sounded absurd to him. "That little apartment. This is your home. We built it together." "No," she said, her voice gentle but unshakably firm. "We built this penthouse. This was your beautiful prison. Remember, my home is in Ballard. It's small, and it's mine. It's the only place I feel safe right now." The distinction was a scalpel to his heart. He had offered her gilded comfort, but she needed safety from him. He nodded slowly, the truth of her words sinking in like a stone. "All right, I understand. Arthur will take you." The next morning, Sebastian Knight did something that sent a tremor through the foundations of the Seattle business community. He called an emergency meeting of the board of Knight Industries. They gathered in the glass-walled room, expecting a briefing on the victorious Thorn acquisition. Instead, they got a resignation. "Effective immediately, I will be stepping down as Chief Executive Officer." Sebastian announced, his voice devoid of hesitation. The faces around the polished table registered shock, disbelief, and in some cases panic. "I will be assuming the role of chairman effective immediately. David Lee will be taking over all day-to-day CEO duties. My focus has shifted. My family requires me." He didn't offer any more explanation. He didn't need to. For the first time, his personal life was not a liability to be managed, but a priority to be served. His first act of redemption was not a grand gesture, but a quiet pilgrimage to a grocery store in Ballard. He walked the aisles utterly out of his element, pushing a cart and scrutinizing labels with the same intensity he once reserved for stock market analysis. Armed with 2 bags of nutrient-rich foods he'd read about online, he appeared at Isabella's door that evening, dressed not in a suit, but in jeans and a simple grey sweater. "I know I can't cook," he admitted, standing awkwardly on her welcome mat. "But I read that folic acid is important, and iron, so I brought spinach, and a steak, and oranges. I can try to make the steak without setting off your smoke alarm." Isabella looked at him, this titan of industry fumbling with a bag of vegetables, a man famous for his intimidating presence, now looking like a nervous teenager on a first date. A genuine smile, the first he had seen directed at him in 2 years, touched her lips. "Come in, Sebastian. The first rule is to preheat the pan. We'll start there." That became their new fragile routine. He didn't push, he didn't demand. He showed up. Several evenings a week he would come to her apartment. They would cook together, their movements, at first clumsy and hesitant, slowly growing into a comfortable rhythm. They talked, but not about the betrayal, not yet. The wound was too raw. They talked about the baby. He was ravenous for information. He accompanied her to every doctor's appointment, sitting quietly in the corner. During one ultrasound, as the technician pointed out, the flickering heartbeat and the curve of a tiny spine, Sebastian stared at the grainy black and white image on the screen, his own heart pounding in his throat. He saw Isabella watch him, her guard softening just a fraction as she saw the undisguised awe on his face. He was not performing, he was present. Progress was not linear. One evening, discussing the nursery, Sebastian casually mentioned, "I've interviewed 3 of the top infant care specialists in the country. We can have a team of 2 on a rotating 24-hour schedule. They can handle the night feeds, everything." The warmth in the room instantly chilled. Isabella put down her fork, her face hardening. "Absolutely not," she said, her voice tight with a fear he didn't immediately understand. "You will not do this, Sebastian. You will not manage our child like a corporate project. He is not a problem to be outsourced. He needs his parents, not a staff." "Is that what this is for you? Another problem your money can solve?" The old Sebastian would have bristled, would have defended his impeccable logic. He felt the impulse rise within him, the urge to explain that he was only trying to provide the best. But he looked at her face and saw her true, the fear that he would remain emotionally distant, a benefactor instead of a father. He took a deep breath, forcing the defensive words down. "You're right," he said, his voice quiet with the effort of his own restraint. "I'm sorry. My instincts are wrong. I'm still learning how to do this. There will be no nannies unless you ask for them. We will do this, together." The apology and the understanding behind it was a more significant stone lifted from the path than any grand gift could have been. His mother, Sebastian Knight, proved to be an essential bridge builder. After Sebastian confessed the entire sordid truth to her, she arrived at Isabella's apartment alone, carrying not a gift, but a photo album. She sat with Isabella for an afternoon, sipping tea and patiently turning the pages. She showed Isabella photos of a serious little boy building elaborate Lego towers, a gangly teenager who was terrible at sports. "My husband, Sebastian's father, was a brilliant man," Catherine confided, her voice soft with memory. "But he was hard. He believed emotion was a vulnerability, that trust was a currency you never gave away freely. He taught Sebastian how to build an empire, but not how to build a home. I'm afraid I didn't do enough to counteract that lesson. You, my dear, she said, reaching out to pat Isabella's hand, were the first person who ever made him want to learn. Please, don't give up on my son. He's finally trying to be the man you always deserved. That visit opened a new door. Slowly, tentatively, Sebastian and Isabella began to talk about the past. One night, he finally asked the question he dreaded most. What was the worst part for you, Izzy? She was silent for a long time. The silence, she finally whispered. After you accused me, you just shut down. I was living in our home with a stranger, a cold, cruel stranger who looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. I felt like I was screaming in a soundproof room. I wasn't just losing my husband, I was losing my best friend, and I didn't even know why. He just listened, absorbing the pain he had caused without defense or justification. The weight of his guilt was immense, but it was a burden he knew he had to carry. In the rainy dawn of a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks before her due date, Isabella went into labor. Sebastian drove them to the hospital, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his mind a whirlwind of fear and a desperate prayer that he could be the man she needed him to be. In the delivery room, he never left her side. He held her hand, wiped the sweat from her brow, and whispered words of encouragement, his voice a steady anchor in her sea of pain. And then, with a final cry, their son was born. A nurse cleaned him and placed him in Sebastian's arms. He was so impossibly small, so perfect. He looked down at the tiny wrinkled face, at the tuft of dark hair, and at the eyes that, when they fluttered open, were the same shade of resolute steel as his own. In that moment, holding Leo Knight, Sebastian's transformation was sealed. The billions, the empire, the ego, it all dissolved into meaningless background noise. The only thing that mattered was the warm, trusting weight in his arms and the exhausted, beautiful woman smiling at him from the hospital bed. This was wealth. This was power. This was a love so profound it remade him from the inside out. Their story found its new beginning, not in a grand romantic gesture, but in the quiet, sacred rhythm of new parenthood. It was found in Sebastian, a man who once commanded boardrooms, expertly changing a diaper at 3 a.m. It was found in Isabella, waking from a nap, to find he had quietly cleaned the entire apartment and cooked her a meal. Months later, on a rare sunny Saturday, they were in a park. Sebastian was pushing a laughing Leo on a swing. He was no longer the imposing titan. He was just a father, his face alight with a joy so pure it was breathtaking. Isabella watched them from a bench, a sense of peace settling over her for the first time in years. He saw her watching and smiled a genuine, unguarded smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He walked over and sat beside her, their shoulders brushing. The comfortable silence stretched between them, filled only by their son's happy squeals. "I love you, Isabella," he said softly, his voice full of an emotion he no longer feared. "It's not just a feeling, it's a promise that I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the second chance you've given me, to be worthy of you and Leo." She leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their son, their future soaring towards the bright blue sky. The prison of his past had been demolished. In its place, they were building something new, something stronger, something real. "I know you will," she whispered, turning to press a gentle kiss to his cheek. "And I love you, Sebastian. Welcome home." The path was finally clear. They were home. From the cold, lonely peak of a financial empire to the humbling reality of a park bench, Sebastian Knight's journey wasn't about regaining his wealth, but discovering its true meaning. His story is a powerful reminder that our greatest mistakes do not have to define us, and that the deepest betrayals can sometimes open a path to the most profound redemption. It teaches us that true strength isn't in building walls around our hearts, but in having the courage to tear them down. What do you believe is the hardest thing to forgive? Was Sebastian's transformation truly possible, or are some wounds too deep to heal? If this story of love loss and the incredible fight for a second chance resonated with you, please show your support by giving this video a like and sharing it with others who appreciate a story with true heart. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell for more real-life dramas that explore the complexities of the human experience. We'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below.